Welcome back to another Explainer, everyone. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating essay by Tariq Zafar Khan called Obsolescence of Science. Right out of the gate, Khan poses this massive, paradigm-shifting question. Is the scientific consensus of our time the ultimate, unbreakable authority on reality, or is it just a temporary stepping stone? We so often treat our modern scientific understanding as the absolute pinnacle of human knowledge. But Kahn's essay challenges that very assumption, arguing that what we confidently call hard science today might literally just be the discarded mythology of tomorrow. It's a brilliant, provocative read, and we're going to break down exactly how he builds this argument.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the author's overarching argument, we'll follow a 5-step path today. We'll start with the illusion of modernity. Look back at when science was wrong, examine the physics revolution, explore modern theories, and finally, arrive at the limits of human reason.
All right, Section 1, the illusion of modernity, or the arrogance of the present.
Khan actually sets the stage here by taking a hard look at human ego and our whole perception of time. You see, ever since the Stone Age, human beings have always believed they were living in the modern era. He writes, based on the discoveries and inventions that will have been made after 500 or 1,000 years from now, it would not be surprising if our era is considered ancient, lacking knowledge, and myths. The core thesis the author is presenting is this: because every single era looks around and genuinely believes it's the undisputed pinnacle of modernity, we have to accept the humbling reality that our current, fiercely defended scientific theories may one day be viewed as nothing more than primitive myths by future generations.
Moving right along to Section 2, when science was wrong, focusing on historical paradigm shifts.
The author doesn't just make a philosophical claim here. He actually backs it up with a series of historical paradigm shifts to show a clear pattern. Deeply held, absolutely undisputed scientific facts are frequently and sometimes dramatically overturned. Let's look at the first example. We have Antoine Lavoisier's 1783 caloric theory. Back then, the rock-solid scientific consensus was that heat was actually a physical, invisible fluid called caloric that flowed between objects. Wild, right? But jump to the breakthrough of 1841. James Prescott Joule proposed that heat wasn't a fluid at all, but rather the result of mechanical motion, which is the foundation of modern thermodynamics. What Khan highlights here isn't just the change in theory, but the intense prejudice and ego Joule faced from the scientific establishment. It took 9 agonizing years of pushing against the scientific elite before his mechanical theory was finally accepted in 1850.
And this brilliantly illustrates the second historical example. For centuries, the absolute smartest minds in the world, heavyweights like Aristotle and Ptolemy, insisted on the geocentric model, where the Earth sits completely unmoving at the exact center of the universe. It was an undisputed scientific fact. But then Copernicus and later Newton championed the heliocentric model, proving the sun was actually at the center of our system. The author points out that this absolute truth was entirely overturned, though definitely not without fierce opposition, particularly from 17th century religious circles who had attached their own beliefs to the old science.
Next, the essay walks us through this fascinating medical timeline. Back in ancient times, the science of the day dictated that diseases were caused by angry gods and spirits, and they were treated with exorcisms. Then, in the Middle Ages, the consensus shifted to an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids or breathing in dirty, foul-smelling miasma air. It wasn't until 1864 that Louis Pasteur revolutionized the whole shebang by discovering germ theory. Khan uses this timeline to show how absolute certainties in the medical field have been repeatedly wiped out and entirely rewritten.
The final historical example Khan provides is the story of the Earth itself. Before 1912, leading scientists insisted, without a doubt, that the Earth's crust was rigid and completely immobile. So when a meteorologist named Alfred Wegener proposed the idea of continental drift, suggesting the continents were actually moving, he was literally laughed out of the room. He was labeled a pseudoscientist, a total fraud. But jump forward to the 1960s, and Cold War submarines mapping the ocean floor finally found the tectonic plates. Wegener was definitively proven right. The author points this out to show that the scientific establishment can be incredibly hostile to the truth just before a major paradigm shift.
Which brings us to Section 3, the physics revolution, rewriting the rules of reality. Khan transitions from general history into the realm of physics, highlighting how even the most fundamental mathematically calculated laws of nature are not safe from being completely rewritten. The essay shares a wonderfully ironic historical anecdote here.
In 1878, a highly respected physicist named Philip von Jolly gave some advice to his student, Max Planck. He told him physics is a highly developed, almost completely mature science, which would soon take its final stable form. Essentially, he was saying, hey, don't bother, we figured it all out. The irony, which the author impartially recounts, is that Max Planck completely ignored this advice, went on to discover quantum mechanics, won a Nobel Prize in 1918, and completely destroyed the notion that physics was anywhere near finished.
To prove just how radically physics can change, Kahn contrasts two titans of the field. Take Isaac Newton's incredibly intuitive idea of gravity, that it's simply a pulling force of attraction between objects with mass. For centuries, this was absolute. But contrast that with Albert Einstein's 1915 theory of general relativity. Einstein proved gravity isn't a pulling force at all. It's actually the counterintuitive curvature and warping of the very fabric of space-time. Massive objects create a physical dent in space. Just like that, the established truth of gravity was entirely redefined.
Let's move on and see how this builds into an even more mind-bending concept. Newtonian physics dictated that space and time were completely separate absolute constants, meaning a second is a second everywhere in the universe. But Einstein's special relativity shattered that completely. He proved that space and time are physically connected, and unbelievably, the speed at which you move actually affects how fast time passes for you. Time can literally slow down or speed up. The absolute certainty of a ticking clock was proven to be entirely relative.
Next up is Section 4, Modern Theories, Future Myths, the Quantum Frontier.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how the author takes everything we've just discussed and applies it to the modern era. If classical physics was upended, what about the quantum concepts we hold so dear today? Kahn suggests that our current cutting-edge science might seem just as absurd to scientists 1,000 years from now as that caloric fluid seems to us. Consider the concept of superposition, as detailed in the essay. Modern quantum mechanics tells us that an object can exist in multiple probable places at the exact same time, and it only chooses a single location when it is actively observed or measured. It completely defies our everyday logic.
And then there's quantum entanglement. This is a concept so groundbreaking it was actually awarded a Nobel Prize in 2022. It states that the quantum states of two particles can become linked. If you measure one, it instantly affects the state of the other, even if they are light years apart across the universe. It completely defies classical physics because these particles somehow remain perfectly interconnected without any physical link bridging that vast distance.
And look at quantum tunneling. The essay describes this as a phenomenon where a particle essentially, mathematically, leaks through a solid potential barrier, like a solid wall, even when it absolutely does not have the classical energy to cross it. The author notes this as a nod to future breakthroughs, referencing a potential 2025 Nobel Prize focus. It's essentially particles walking straight through walls.
But perhaps the most humbling statistic the author brings up is this single number, 5. According to modern astrophysics, ordinary matter, literally everything we can see, touch, and observe with our most powerful telescopes, all the stars and galaxies, makes up a mere 5% of the universe. The other 95%? It's mysterious dark matter and dark energy that we can't even directly detect. Kahn uses this to highlight just how incredibly limited our current vision of reality actually is.
Finally, Section 5, the limits of human reason, looking at science versus divine truth.
This is where the author really synthesizes his historical and scientific examples into his ultimate philosophical point. He explores how this constant overturning of scientific paradigms should influence our understanding of absolute truth, faith, and miracles. The author lays out a logical progression to make his case. He starts with step 1, arguing that observing the intricate design of creation logically points to the existence of a creator. Then, in step 2, he points to the incredibly complex, literal programming code found within human DNA, arguing that a program necessitates a programmer. Finally, in step 3, from the author's perspective, this chain of rational evidence ultimately leads a seeker of truth to divine revelation, specifically the Quran. The author is using human reason here to deduce a starting point that goes far beyond just the physical world.
To support this, the essay shares a really powerful quote from Islamic thinker Sayyid Qutb. It reads, "What we consider to be human reason is a very uncertain and temporary thing. Therefore, the real ruler is the absolute being and his Quran." In the context of the essay, Kahn uses this to argue that believers make a massive mistake when they try to alter their interpretation of ancient miracles just to appeal whatever scientific theory happens to be popular today. Because, as we've seen, today's indisputable science could literally be gone tomorrow.
So the crucial point is, Kahn reaches a fascinating conclusion here.
Worldly knowledge is inherently evolutionary and speculative. Experimentation and observation are strictly prone to human error, and scientific knowledge entirely relies on the temporary tools of whatever era it's conducted in. Therefore, human reason and the scientific method, while absolutely incredible for building bridges and curing diseases in our everyday lives, cannot be the final, absolute judge of reality, making it, in his view, an improper yardstick for invalidating absolute religious truths.
And that leaves us with one incredibly provocative thought to ponder. If history virtually guarantees that the undisputed scientific facts of today are destined to become the discarded myths of tomorrow, how do we, as a species, ultimately define absolute truth? It's a question that challenges the very foundation of how we view the world. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked this incredible essay, and I encourage you to keep questioning what you think you know.